All right, here we are in week 6. Happy holiday weeks. Still in the process of holidays. How are holidays going for you guys so far?
Good.
Yeah, good. Just trying to relax after the holidays.
That's good. And is it working? Are you getting some relaxation in?
Yeah, lots of just hanging out and doing nothing. It's been really nice.
Good. And hopefully not feeling guilty for doing nothing.
Always feeling
Yeah.
guilty about it. It's omnipresent.
Yeah, that omnipresent like default, like how we talked the other day, like the default
Mm-hmm.
is always there. Yeah, for sure. Good. Well, I haven't heard from Michael, so I'm not sure that he's coming, but we'll keep moving, and if he comes, great. All right, so quick check-in. How are you feeling as you're coming into the session today? Gina, how are you feeling?
A little bit behind. I feel like I really fell behind in the module, so I think I just started week 6. No, I started week 5. So, or I'm at the end of week 5. So I feel like I'm behind. So I feel a little bit behind right now.
What you know?
So I'm feeling good about the session, but like overall, probably a little overwhelmed because I had I mentioned to you earlier, I had a therapy appointment, and so just doing like some things for that on top of this and getting it just felt a little overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you're still feeling in that space of
Yeah.
overwhelmed. Yeah, good. All right, well, we'll have Michael hop on here. Michael, can you hear me yet? We just did a little check-in. I asked people like, how are you feeling coming into today?
You're talking to me?
Yep.
Okay, sounds great. My volume
How are,
was down.
how are you feeling coming into today?
Ah, behind and disengaged.
Yeah. Good. Well, you showed up, so that's a win.
Yeah, that happened last time. I missed the week prior too. So
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. All right, let's do a little PQ rep. And we're gonna do a label with Anchor. Has everybody done the label with Anchor inside the app already? No. It is one that didn't unlock right away. It unlocked after doing some activities. So if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites, but we're going to do a little practice of it here. So the intention here is that your breath is your anchor. And so you are self-commanding your mind to focus on your breath. The labeling part is what you do anytime that your mind wanders to anything else. You just label whatever that thought was and come back to your breath. Don't worry about what you should label it, or if you have the same thing come back again, just label it again and come back to your breath. But rather than just focusing on your breathing, the labeling gives your brain a second thing to do, which, we'll practice it and see what happens for you guys. But so your intention will be to focus on your breath. Anytime your mind gets distracted from your breath, label whatever that thought was and come back to focusing on your breath. Label it as many times as you need to and just come back to your breath. No judgment, no whatever. Just label it, whatever the first thing that comes to you, how you'd label it, and then come back to your breath. So you might have it something like as you're breathing, you might be like breath, because that's what you're thinking about. Breath, breath. Oh, I forgot to do that. Breath, breath. Distraction capped. Breath, breath. Food, breath, food, 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 breath. Like whatever it is that you're thinking about, just label it and then come back. When you're focused on your breath, you just label breath. Okay. Any questions before we get started? All right. So you can either do this with your eyes open. If you do that, just pick a focal point to look at in the room and use that as a anchor and then focus on your breath, or you can close your eyes and do this as well. So as always, if you're able to put your feet flat on the floor and sit up straight, just alerts your brain in a different way. If you're not able to, that's okay too. And before you even start doing the labeling, just take a first really deep intentional breath in as far as you can breathe in. And when you have that air all the way into your body, hold it for a couple of seconds and then release it and try to release all the air out of your body. And then when you start your next breath, you'll just start labeling. So your anchor is your breath. When you're thinking about your breath, you label it breath. Anytime it gets distracted, label the thought and come back to your breath. And thoughts, label those, and then come back to your breath and label your breath. So commanding that your brain focuses only on your breath and releases everything else. Great job. When you're ready, you can come back into the room. What did you notice as you did that PQ rep? What did you notice?
Very distracted brain. There were lots of labeling, very little breath.
Yeah.
And then I, eventually forgot to label it all at the end. So I
Yep.
think definitely needs practice.
Yep. And it's a great, yes, that's totally normal. It's totally normal. Did you notice any patterns or anything specific about what the distracting thoughts were?
Like the things I was thinking of, just
Mhm.
chores
Mhm.
to do.
Yeah, to do. Action, activity.
Mhm.
Yeah. How about you, Miles?
Same as Gina at first, like it was a lot of distracting dots. Um, it wasn't no like clear cut dots, just random stuff. Um, but then I think once I start having a rhythm of concentrating it, like each time I breathe in, I just say breath, I start getting just more relaxing in general.
Yeah,
But yeah.
great. How about you, Michael?
It's hard to like have two breaths in a row without a distraction. And from your example, it just seemed like a lot of distractions compared to focusing on breath for 2 or 3 breaths. And then just distracted by sound in the background downstairs, and then my hands, and then something I'm negotiating, and just like kind of assumptions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So all of those things are totally normal. The thing that is really powerful about this particular PQ practice is, especially anybody here who's neurospicy, our brains function better when we have more than one thing to focus on, actually. So when you're doing this, you're focusing on both your breath and the labeling of whatever the thoughts are. So those two things can start to help bring focus. But even neurotypical brains, what can be helpful about practicing this exercise over time is the learning to like label and release and come back to the breath, label and release and come back to the breath. Sometimes the labeling can either show you patterns that you might have, or you just, as you continue to label, sometimes just the labeling allows you to start releasing the thought, because you're acknowledging to your brain, oh yeah, I recognize that there's this thing happening, or that I should think about, or that I have to do, or I didn't do, or wondering about. I recognize it. And for this moment, I'm just going to come back to the breath. So It can be a really powerful one to practice. And that's one you can practice wherever you're at. So you could use your breath as the anchor. Like, let's say you're having a conversation and you realize you're distracted and not present. You can also use like that person's voice that you're trying to listen to as the anchor. You think about voice, 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 distraction, voice, 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 distraction, right? So it's a powerful one to practice. And the more you practice, the stronger that muscle will get, and the less distraction will distract you. Okay, so we're going to talk about following up from last week's and then reviewing this week's and talking about what's coming in your final weeks. So just following up from last week's, which was about the sage perspective of explore and innovate. As you guys went through practicing those, did any questions or thoughts come up?
I don't think it was necessarily about this week. But one thought that came up to my mind is that I recognize when Shastart was talking, when he had like a saboteur coming up in the middle of while he was doing a speech or just anything, he did a PQ rep. And for me, that just sounds kind of hard to do a PQ rep while doing something, because when I'm doing a PQ rep, I'm concentrating on not concentrating in a way, on not distracting myself. So it's like, there's just so much brain activity when I'm like trying to soak in like a conversation and I feel a saboteur going on. So then I try to do a PQ rep while also trying to maintain that conversation. That just sounds difficult. But that was just like a thought that came up in my head.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a really common thought. So think about it like, he is like the Jedi master of controlling his brain because he's been doing these practices for so long. So when we're just starting out, absolutely, that is a really hard thing to do because we're thinking about PQ reps in the way that we think about a lot of things. Like, oh, if I need to do this, I have to really be like, I can't do anything else. And that's how we operate. As your muscles get stronger, it will become a little bit easier to do more than one, like to be able to do a PQ rep while maintaining a conversation. In the meantime, though, so just know like that's like, practice, 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 really strong muscles. It would be like the similar of like if I'm going to go into like a bodybuilding competition and be like, oh man, how come I can't lift that kind of weight like they're lifting when I don't go to the gym at all and lift any weight? Like, well, of course, I'm not going to be able to do that. That takes a lot of training and practice, and they are proficient at exactly what they're doing in order to lift those big, like, I have a client who does that. And like, I'm like, how do you not pull your back out every time? Because that looks like it would just pull your back out. But she knows what she's doing because she practices and she trains and all of that, right? So she can do that thing easily. I'm like, that looks really difficult. She once was in my position as well, right? So if we keep building these muscles, that will become easier. One way, that's actually that labeling exercise, that is one way to help with what you're talking about, because rather than thinking about, I have to really focus on a specific PQ rep, like, okay, I can only think about this thing that's unrelated to what's happening. If you use your anchor as something that's happening around you. So like, let's say you're getting so I think his example might have been like audience being distracted, right? Like faces of the audience. He decided he was going to focus on one face or whatever he said he was going to focus on. So he decides I have a focal point, whatever that anchor is. And then anything else, you could just label it and then come back to that focus. So you don't have to do like, okay, something completely separate. So for example, let's say that you're dealing with your daughter and she's having a temper tantrum and like your patience is going and you're like, I wish I could just like be like, pause and then go do a PQ rep and like get calm and then come back and like deal with it, right? But you can't, she's not going to pause. Like that's not possible, right? So in that moment, you could actually choose to be like, okay, I'm going to focus on like how, like the sound of her voice as she's having the temper tantrum, or I'm going to really focus on the color of her shirt. And then like I'm thinking, instead of thinking like tantrum, 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 you start to be like, okay, shirt, 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 tantrum, tantrum, shirt, shirt, right? So like pulling in something that is part of what's happening. Does that make sense?
Piggybacking off of what Miles said, because I'm having the same issue. Like I procrastinate and then I memorize and then I try to remember what I need to remember over and over again right before I go into a meeting or a presentation or anything. And so there are outside distraction thoughts, and then we're trying to like clear our mind to stay focused, but like I had an interview earlier this month in the drive there, I was thinking through questions and what I wanted to say, and then sitting there to not be nervous, I did a PQ rep, but then I'm like not keeping my mind present to the things I want to remember.
So what do you think is the disconnect between like a PQ rep, the intention of a PQ rep is actually to be more present, not less. So what do you think is happening that makes you feel less present after a PQ rep?
Well, having to want to remember these things is not being fully present, but it provides results in the setting.
So is your mind saying to you, if you put PQ rep information in your mind, those other things have to go out?
So, like an example is like the past companies I've done big projects for and remembering the specific names and the quantities of the projects and the dates without my resume in front of me and everything. So it's like, this is just a specific example, being nervous that if I PQ rep and kind of distract myself from like kind of reciting those in my mind constantly to make sure they're there when I'm need to share them. It's just a mind
Yeah,
like it just counterintuitive, I think is
yeah. So because your brain is telling you right now that there's only space for one of those. Like I have to fully occupy my mind with the things I'm trying to recite and remember, or else I'm going to forget them. Is that
yeah.
accurate?
And
Yeah.
it's the same with like when someone's talking and you have something you want to say and then you're trying to remember that, but then you're not present with them. And then whatever is there to say to them when they're done talking, if you forget that, you're like, shoot, I forgot it. Or maybe it's not relevant to what they were saying, but it's that give and take of like being fully present and also not wanting to lose that thought.
Yeah. So in an ideal setting, what would you like to be happening in that scenario?
I don't really know. I mean, I guess I know it's best to be present, but I guess it's a fear of forgetting what I want to remember.
And what happens if you forget what you want to remember?
It's almost like a not prepared, or I guess I'm attached to that thing I have to say. Like
Yeah.
it's most important thing in the conversation or something.
Yeah. So I think there's actually a bigger piece there of like where I would say PQ falls into that is like, how can I release the control of it should go a certain way? So like in the interview, for example, like, yes, of course, it's great if you can recite those things. Also, probably most people wouldn't be upset if you were like, oh, I'm just going to reference my CV, which you also have, to talk about these dates, right?
Yeah.
So like finding other ways to release some of that tension and pressure, like using your sage powers to be like, how can I make this easier on myself? And in conversation, think like the thought more of like, rather than it's really important that I have to say whatever it is I'm going to say. So I'm going to maybe even interrupt that person to say it
Yeah.
because I want to make sure I say it. I'm going to trust that if I really need to say it, I'm going to remember it. And if I don't remember it, that's okay. I can choose in that moment. I'm just going to accept that I forgot it, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I know that's better in years of other professional or personal development work, they would say thank you for that thought, disappear it, stay present with what the person's saying. Then when they're done speaking, then say what's there for you to say at that time instead of being attached to what your thoughts while they're speaking. I know that it's just when I was doing the exercises this week and what Miles was sharing, I think it's the same thing. It's like doing a PQ rep is like mind erasing. It's so
Yeah, so I would say like the practice, like see about shifting the perspective around PQ reps aren't meant to erase your mind. They're meant to focus your mind. So how could you, like, for you, and each person kind of has to answer this, because for sure when there's neurospiciness happening, that has an impact. So it's a very classic ADHD trait for us to be like, I'm just going to say what I need to say because otherwise I'm going to forget, because same thing, like if something isn't physically in front of me, I might forget about it because I need, like, spatially I have that reminder, right?
crap all over
So
my desk right here.
yeah, like that is very classic ADHD. So we have to learn techniques different from a neurotypical person because we have different triggers.
Okay.
So for me, I will just say, like, because I have ADHD and mine is primarily on the attentive side, like I lose focus. And so one of the practices I will have is for sure the practice of, like, pause. Like, if somebody else is talking, I'm going to pause. And then if in that pause I'm feeling anxious or I'm not present, I do a PQ rep in that moment around something that is connected to the conversation. So, like, I'm going to listen now intently to the timbre of their voice, or I'm going to really look at some feature on their face, or I'm going to whatever, something that is connected to what's going on that I want to focus on. And that's basically telling my brain, this is what we're focusing on, not those other things. Because otherwise what our natural tendency is that we have the thought and then we follow it.
Okay.
And now we're very disconnected from whatever was happening.
Okay.
But it's practice. Like, all of this is practice. So the bodybuilding example, like, this is all practice. We can know all the information, like all the information you've gotten from what you've learned before, we can know it. But if our brain is still behaving in the other pattern, then we need a lot more practice. We've got to go back to that gym and practice until we're able to lift up the bar, right? We have to practice. We can't expect mental progress just the way we can't expect physical progress to happen, like, instantly, right? I was just talking with somebody about weight loss, and they lost like 100 pounds over the course of time. And they were like, people will come to me and ask for, like, me to give them tips. And so I give them tips, and they'll do things for like 2 weeks and come back and be like, it's not working for me. And she's like, I did not lose 100 pounds in 2 weeks. Like, I don't know. That's not what happens. But we want it quickly. We want to see, like, this is working. But same thing with our mental. We have to keep doing it. And eventually we'll start to see the results. But we have to keep practicing. If it's only knowledge, but we're having the old behaviors, we're just leaving it as knowledge. That's something it's a lie of transformation that you guys will hear about in week 7's material. Oh, great. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, Miles?
Oh, sorry. So just basically what I gather from that is like the Karate Kid type of thing, where
Yes.
it's almost like when we're doing the PQ stuff or listening to the PQ, it's all about practice. But then, like, eventually, like, it's just gonna become an instinct almost. Is that like what we're trying to get at? Like,
Yes.
Karate Kid, like if he's coming at, he's gonna do the wax off type of block. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That is a great way to think about it. That is exactly right. Because you're
Okay.
practicing wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. Like, what am I doing? I'm doing the crane. Why? Why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And then
Yeah.
because it becomes just muscle memory, same with mental muscle memory. Same thing, like practice. So I can tell you, after now a year and a half or something like that, or I guess, yeah, a year and a half of PQ practice, it's not that I never have saboteurs, 100% I do. I just will now catch them more quickly and release them. Like, I don't even have to do it in a lot of scenarios, not every scenario, but in a lot of scenarios, I can just be like, oh, what? Nope, I can let it go. But that's from, like, time. Like, now my block is like, oh yeah, block it.
I got you.
But
Well, okay, well, sorry to
no.
keep asking, but to like just to make sure it's clear, so like for example, if we need to do a PQ rep during a conversation and I decide to do like a tactile PQ rep, instead of concentrating on like how my fingers feel, is like at that point, once I get better, it's like I'm already just kind of feeling it while still taking the information in.
Mhm.
So it's just like a natural occurrence type of thing. Okay,
Yes,
okay,
totally. Like for me, when I do the fingers, I actually just like hold them together. And that's
okay.
enough now for my brain to go like, oh wait, pause,
Hmm.
pause. Like, hold on, pause. You're going somewhere that you don't need to go, pause,
Okay.
breathe. Right. So again, you guys will all find your own rhythms and like what works well for you. Um, but that's exactly right. Like it's a practice over time. Like the chopsticks with the fly. Like when you
Hmm.
first try to catch a fly with chopsticks, be like, what? No. And then he just was like, got it. Same thing. But in the beginning, it feels exactly like Karate Kid. Like this doesn't make any difference. This isn't working. Why am I doing this? I'm wasting my time. Over time, that's when it starts to kick in. So this is good. This is a really great discussion. I appreciate this. Okay, so let's like just looking back, the accept or convert, it was a big thing from last week. In the moment, do I accept this for now or am I trying to convert it? Big, powerful tool. And then I want to, before we do that, thinking about activate. So activate, excuse me, was from this week. And really, let's just start here. So sage accountability, no judgment. Did you watch this week's video? So around activate. Yes, no, some of it.
The daily things?
No, the module.
Was that released this morning?
No, this would have been for the one that was last Friday.
Okay.
Today's releasing should be for next week's. Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay. So I'll just do a quick overview of Activate so that everybody has some of this information. So the Activate power, that sage power of Activate is really, if you think about a wheel, if we want to get a wheel going, we need to like first get it spinning. And then once it's spinning, it's easier to keep it going. So activate is a really key part of activating our sage because it gets the whole wheel going. So then all of the other powers, if we take some action, all of the other powers are a little bit more likely to come because we're already in action. So action is like what starts that wheel in motion. It orchestrates all the sage powers by taking some action. Saboteur interference, as you guys have already learned, that's what will come in and be like, wait, it's going to stop that wheel from its motion. We're going to talk about 4 success strategies around Activate. One of the big key questions in Activate is to ask what's needed right now. So when you are in a scenario and their saboteurs are at work, pausing and saying what's needed right now. So say, for example, Michael, to take your interview question or your interview scenario, like when you realize like, oh, I'm getting distracted by whatever, or I'm not going to remember my things. Okay, in this moment, exactly right now, what's needed? Oh, what I need is to feel really present. Okay, then what do I do? And we'll talk about these 4 strategies of when you know what to do, you can do one of these 4 strategies to activate it. But that what's needed right now is a really powerful question because most of the time, your brain is starting to think about things that are not necessarily about the right now, right? You're thinking about what's coming, what might be tomorrow, what might happen next week, what didn't happen yesterday, but not like what's needed right now in this moment. So it's a good focusing question. And then these 4 strategies are really quick, easy strategies around activate. So the first is to ensure the first step. So making a small step, but that's sufficient enough for celebration, ensuring the first step. So if you identify what I need to do is to be more present. Okay, well, what's one small step that I could take that would help me be present right now? That would be, asking that question. The second one is to energize your sage brain. So that would be like, okay, I know before I go into that interview, I actually want to do a really long PQ gym session to help activate all of my sage so that when I'm in there, my saboteur is not already saying to me, you're going to forget, you're going to forget, you're going to forget. But I can be calm because I know I've already put the information in my brain. And if I need it, I will recall it. All right, so you do a PQ gym session before to charge up your sage so that your saboteurs have less control. The third is to anticipate your saboteurs. So thinking about what is coming and knowing how your saboteurs might want to interfere and thinking ahead, what's a sage response that I could have if that happens? So you look ahead and say, I know I'm going to be frustrated when my daughter has a temper tantrum. I know this is going to happen. It happens all the time. So how will my saboteurs try to interfere with that? Okay, they're going to tell me that I'm being a bad dad, or they're going to tell me that I don't have time for this. They're going to tell me that I better shut this down right away. They're going to tell me whatever. I know that's what they're going to tell me. What might be a sage response that I could prepare ahead of time? Okay, I know it helps me when I take a deep breath and ask her a question. I know that helps. Okay, so I'm going to have that as my sage strategy before we even get into the scenario. And then the last one is to embody the activate power. And this is about actually physically embodying. So if you start to think about if you were showing up the way you want to, how would you physically be showing up? If you were mentally showing up the way you wanted to, how would you also physically be showing up? Activating that. So, somebody's body posture, if they're kind of hunched over and like, that relays one thing. If you are shoulders back, face forward, head up, very different energy, right? So actually embodying activate power. If you were going to take some action, small action, what would you physically look like? So putting your body into that posture can actually start to activate the activate power. So any questions about these 4 strategies? Or about the activate power? Okay. All right. Let's talk about what actions are your saboteurs making hard right now? So thinking about things that you're dealing with, what are they telling you right now? Oh, that's hard. And then what messages do they say about why it's hard? So I can't possibly, it's going to be hard to remember all the details. And it's hard because I can't possibly remember what I need to remember. Whatever, I don't know, that's what you were saying, Michael, but think about what are they making hard? What are they saying about why it's hard? And then how can you use those activate strategies to create more ease in that scenario this week? And then how could asking what's needed now support you? Okay. All right, let's start with Miles.
So like discuss what saboteurs are making it hard.
What actions are your saboteurs making hard?
So I might not be answering this question directly, but like what it's doing, it my overwhelmness a little bit is causing a little bit of like what Michael said at the beginning, which is disengagement, but also procrastination. Um, so, I think it's part of like my avoidance type of saboteur, whereas like it seems hard. So my action would be procrastinating, which is in a way, I guess, avoiding. Um, and then when I do
So
do it,
let me
go
just ask
ahead.
a quick question. So when you're like, what is your saboteur telling you is going to be hard that makes you want to procrastinate? What's going to be hard?
Um, I think I think just paying attention, just engaging. I think that's the part that's going to feel hard. Like if I'm going into it like it's like a checklist that I have to go into, it's harder for me to engage. And then if I feel like I'm not engaging, I'm not getting basically my money's worth out of it. Like I feel like I'm wasting money or anything of that nature.
And there, it's hard because what is it saying about why it's hard?
Um, mm, so why is it hard? I don't know how to answer that really. I think it's hard because it feels like, I guess the best way, because it feels like a time waster at this point. If I'm not engaged and I'm not willing to learn, it's just, I wouldn't call it boring. But I guess I'd rather be doing something else,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yep.
something, I guess, more fun. I don't, more mentally stimulating.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's hard because it's not fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then the second two questions, how could you use activate strategies if now you know your saboteur is telling you engaging is hard because it's not fun.
So, one of the activate strategies was like to take it first step.
Mm-hmm.
And then I recognized it was to realize my saboteurs. The first step was like, like just get some done at a time. Um, I told like Michael this in the pod is like what I've been doing is trying to revamp my schedule. So that was like one of the parts where I was like, I tried to innovate on or explore. Where if I see, I change my mindset where if I see the hour going, well, like the hour about to change, so whether it's like 10:40, I was like, oh, let me make sure I do this before 11, instead of like instead of making sure like, oh, I have to do this like once the hour changes or anything like that. It's like, just make sure you do it before 11. My brain usually works with that better. But I'm still working on that because it's still like I still got that mindset like it's just a checklist. So that's what I'm still working on.
So I'm
Um,
curious if there is any thought about if your mind is like, oh, that's a checklist, and then a checklist is not fun, right? I'm just got to do
yeah.
it. Is there any way that a checklist could become more fun or more engaging?
Uh, that's the question I'm looking forward to. Like that's the answer I want to. Once again, going back to what I told Michael before, like I was looking at exercise. Like I do strength training at least 3 times a week, and I still see that as a task. Um, and I've been doing strength training for years, and it's just like it's just it's the most efficient way for me to exercise. But I'm still looking for that answer, like how to make it fun rather than a checklist. So that's the difficult part. Like once I find something I need to do, it's just I don't know. The only thing I can do is probably just look at it as um like things will get better time is going on. Like I'll look at the end benefits rather than the current benefits. I guess, because at the end of the day, even if I'm only engaging 50% or even 20%, it's still 20% more than what I would be doing if I didn't do it at all. So
Yeah.
that's the mindset
Yeah,
I'm getting.
for sure. And then another thought, and this might be something like we could talk about it when we do one-on-one sessions, if this is an important thing for you, but thinking about um, like what are the things that you do enjoy and knowing that. But one way, because a lot of times how we're trying to solve all of these things, like when I'm asking these questions in the moment, when we're in a situation like this, we're still in our mind, in our head. We're not
Hmm.
really coming from a sage perspective. Usually when we're doing this, we're thinking about it. And a lot of times, the more we're thinking about something, the less creative response we're going to get because we're in a different part of the brain. We're trying to logically be like, oh, here's the thing to do. But
Hmm.
doing a long gym PQ session where what you're looking for is, I want to think about what might make this thing fun. So think about that elephant story, where it was like different perspectives from the same scenario, right? I'm looking at this right now like, man, I don't really enjoy this process. I'm doing it because I know it's good for me, but I don't enjoy any of it. That's the perspective I'm coming from right now. What other
Hmm.
angles might exist here? if you really like socializing, could there be a way to do it with somebody that would make it more fun? Or if you're looking at it like, okay, instead of focusing on like, I checked it off my list, I'm going to really focus on like thinking about how all the muscles feel as I'm lifting the weights instead of just going through the motions. Or I'm just going to try something one day and go in and be like, if I go and I'm really focused on my breath and trying to see if it makes any difference, if I'm breathing a certain way, is it like gamifying it almost like, let me try it this
Mhm.
way and see what else happens instead of it just being routine, right? So, like, what other angle might there be around the thing that right now the perspective is, I just have to get it done?
I just had like a light bulb idea. My wife did it before, did this before, and sometimes she just wants a refresher. And one thing what I love about doing with my wife is watching TV shows. And we just like to discuss and, anticipate, theorize, um, or recap, share our ideas. So I think like, especially when it comes to like the modules, if I do some with her and then we can like just discuss and give our feedback, I think it will kill two birds with one stone because not only I will be more engaged with the module, it will only reinforce my engagement just by talking about it with her afterwards.
Yeah. And that sounds more exciting than just doing it on your own.
Yes, ma'am.
That sounds like a sage option, right? Like to create,
Mm,
so see how it's possible. Like what I want you to like take away is like for sure that specific idea, but also that shows that that was a very short amount of time that you're like, oh, what about this way? We can tend to get in this thing of thinking like, I don't know, there's only one way to think about it. But very quickly, when you allowed some space, there was another idea that was right there that feels more engaging to you, less of
mm,
a drag, right? And that is what's always there. So that sage is actually always available. It's just we've got to get some space to tap into it. So if the solutions that you guys come up with, and this is what we tend to do is be like, okay, I'm going to come up with a logical solution and be like, okay, it sounds good because it's logical and it makes sense. But you don't feel any other spark around that new solution, you're probably going to drop the new solution eventually anyway, right? So like don't give up yet. Keep thinking about how can you spark something that feels like, ooh, I feel compelled, I feel drawn into that instead of like, ugh, I have to do this. Right. So, but yeah, great work. Great idea. I love it. Love it. Anything else you want to add from the what's needed now or the activate strategies?
Um, no, I'm still just thinking about if anything, I wish I could come up with something after all the time about my workout, my gym workout, because we don't do the same workout. She does Pilates, I do strength training. So I gotta just find a different way. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and or maybe it's not the same, like the solution isn't I do it with my wife, but the solution is
Mm,
something, there's some other thing. We're creating a contest with each other and we're checking in about the contest and I'm doing something
mm,
different on my contest than she is, but we're both committing to this thing or whatever. Like, how can I make it fun? How can we celebrate together that we did it? Are we doing like a little like, even if it's like we did that thing, celebration of the thing that's just routine right now and infusing a little bit of fun into the thing that right now feels like not
mm,
fun. Or, maybe you find once a week you do like I know you're saying she does Pilates, you do strength training, and Pilates strengthens a lot, right?
mm,
So maybe one week you go to a Pilates class with her, and one day a week she does strength training with you or something, that's like, you know, cross pollination.
mm.
All right, do you pick who shares next?
Gina.
Right now I am having a hard time starting a new book. I write middle grade horror and fantasy, and I've had a hard time getting past. I think my saboteurs make it hard because none of my books have been sold. And so this will have been the fifth book I'll be writing. And I think that since I already know the outcome, I'm like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work for like not to achieve the outcome. And I think that I do have fun during the ideation and like plotting and building these worlds. And then I'm like, oh, when I actually get to the writing part, that's a lot of work and I'm tired. And then I'm just going to like toss it in the trash. And then I get very existential. Like, is this my life? Like throwing art in the trash? Like so I feel like it gets very dark and big. And so I think that's the one I'm having a hard time with right now.
So how could you use activate strategies?
Um, I think I'm having a hard time thinking of a new first step. So I've used body doubling, I have a critique group, I've had mentors in the past. Um, I think it's trying to find out a way, like Miles, to make it fun or maybe change the outcome so that it's not about like publishing, it's more about like maybe on this book I focus on a different thing to make it interesting and fun.
So
Um,
that first step might be like, okay, I'm gonna reconsider what my goal is with this. Is my goal to have a creative project? When I'm done with a creative project, I can decide on the next goal. Like, am I gonna try to publish it then? But like my first step is deciding a goal that feels compelling to me versus this one feels like compelling because you would like the idea of having it done. But the idea of writing the book is not compelling right now.
Can I add on to that or give
Yeah.
a suggestion? So like, um, I don't do fan fiction, but like I come up with like fan fiction stories type of thing. And then my first degree was in film, so I had to do a lot of screenwriting. In fact, that's what I originally wanted to do was write for TV shows. But so one thing I had was I did two strategies when I had like writer's block. One, I was like I went back to the basics, which is uh, going very basic story. So like choosing a story that I kind of like and then going kind of basic on it, but then kind of expanding on that. Because it was like, how would I would fix it to not make it basic, and then kind of incorporate that in my writing. Other than that, if I had writer's block, this sounds like the opposite, but I would write the story of like it was a casual conversation or like or what I'm telling it, but I don't know myself what's coming up next. I'm just writing free form in a way, and then might come back to it. But that was just my strategies back when I did some screenwriting.
that's cool.
Mhm.
And also like thinking in that like the question here is around like to create more ease this week, right? So you're thinking your brain is like, I want to fix the whole thing. Like what could create more ease around this project this week?
I think deciding a goal is interesting because I think that maybe it's gotten too crazy, too dark, and like, why am I writing the first? I think it's just I've been doing it for a long time. And then maybe um I almost think hiring a writing coach to help me do accountability because I feel like to get me out of my head and maybe lock it down into like smaller steps, that could be helpful.
Mhm.
And maybe just like sucking it up and writing a paragraph. I feel like my worry about that is my nature is to suck it up and do all these things. And I feel like if my whole life is just getting through things, nothing is fun. So I
Yeah.
don't want it to like, I don't want to do that. I just feel like even having a small goal, like writing a paragraph, I haven't been able to do that. And so I don't, something is blocking me from even doing that. Like it doesn't seem fun. It doesn't seem interesting. It seems like it's for naught. And so I think I need to think of something else to do instead of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the core question is what is what is most important to you? So when you guys get into Navigate next week, this will also be part of that. But like, what is the most important to you? Like, is the most important thing to you like I'm doing something in my own time that's creative? Because obviously in your job you're doing creative stuff all the time, all day long. But my main thing is I want something that feels creative and fun in my personal life that is not connected to work. If that's number one, then that is the like what can I do that's compelling around that? Disconnected from it has to be the book, it has to be this, it has to get published. If the most important thing is I want to write another book that gets published, then that's the center thing. But I think like just from our conversations, I think that it's really more about like you need some creative outlet, some creative flow
Mhm.
more than like the publishing is because the saboteur comes in and tells you, well, it's a waste of time if it's not going to that end. Like, why would you do anything? And you said something really interesting. You said, am I just going to be throwing away art? So
Mhm.
I would challenge that by thinking like, okay, why do I believe that producing it and then it not getting published is wasting or throwing away the art but I don't think it's throwing away the art by never allowing the idea to come out to the world. Like that's not wasting art, but it's wasting art if I write it and it doesn't go anywhere.
No, I know. I mean, the book I am working on is about that exact thing. The nature of art and like how it's our responsibility that not all is for other eyes. Some of it is just to add to the creative nature of the universe and put it back into the world. So I understand this. It's just like believing maybe I think all books that I've been writing have dealt with my own psychology a little bit. And then I think that sometimes when you get too deep into what you're thinking and it becomes too much of a reflection of yourself, it's like, oh, do I really want to go there? That's like, this is a kid's book, but it's being my therapy journal instead. I think that this book is important, obviously, to me to like try to make myself believe this because I do believe it, but it's just a hard thing to practice. So maybe it's more of a why don't we pick a topic that's lighter and more fun? It's just like I feel like everything kind of like magnetically skews into one of these old
Oh,
things in the brain. Yeah.
yeah, totally. Or what if it's therapeutic for you to have it be like this is like therapy for me because I discover in a new way when I'm thinking about characters or I'm drawing the character or I'm writing dialogue that characters might have, that actually helps me uncover things that I might not see otherwise. What if the project is like, I don't know that this is ever going to become a book that anybody else sees, but this is my time to be like, what do I need to unpack today? Da, da, da,
Hmm.
da. And
Yeah, I
if
think
something comes, it comes.
Right. Right.
I think you should go heavy. That's something every time, anytime someone's coming up with a story, if it's a pour out, I think you should always go the heavy route. You can solve the rest later.
Right. I know. I agree with it because I do love doing those things. It's just like it's a deep cave to go inside yourself and to like dig into those things. And it's just like it's it's effortful. And I think that with all of these things, like with all of PQ, what I'm realizing is that like I am getting older and I feel like I am understanding older people who don't want to do anything anymore because in my mind I'm quantifying energy output and I'm just like, oh, that's so much energy. And like I'm like, oh my God, is my life going to be like me laying on the couch forever? Because like I know the energy required to do things. And so I want to do things. I mean,
I mean, it may be that you decide that the things that you used to do are not worth the energy that you put out. That happens. Like, I certainly don't do all the things I once did because I'm like, now my energy is more limited and I'm deciding where that energy goes, which may be it. All
Mhm.
along those things, like these practices though, can actually make all of that lighter. But we have to get through the part that's like, well, this part feels like it's not fun. If we can get through that, like I'll just say like I'm able to release things more easily, like, oh, I don't have to do that. I cannot do that and it's fine. Or I can spend the day today not being productive and that's okay. What I need. And I know I'm not going to stay here forever. It's just what I need today. And I can do that without all of the extra baggage, but it's from doing repetitive work over time with these practices, right? So if what you need is like a therapeutic journal, or like even the part of you that's like, it's going to be so hard to unpack all of that. What would be another perspective with that elephant? What if it could be fun to unpack it and it didn't have to feel heavy, even though it's like meaningful, deep material? What if the unpacking didn't have to feel heavy?
Mhm.
What would, what could make it feel not so heavy? So,
I just think coming up with ideas that make it seem lighter and more interesting, um, and that can keep me engaged and excited about it.
yeah,
I think it's just like coming up with those ideas that can breadcrumb me throughout the story.
yeah, yeah. So that can be your first step of like, I'm going to use all my creative problem solving and generate 5 ideas that could make this lighter or more interesting.
Mhm.
That could be like a first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Michael.
Um, I'm not. What actions? Like it's there for me to go work out every day, but then I'll procrastinate for almost an hour and a lot of times end up not going because something else comes up. And it's just a matter of like not making it a big deal to pack my bag and go and just leave the house in 5 minutes and just jump and do it. Um, like finalizing my divorce, like, like I'm not uh, getting all my accounts transferred over to my name and getting everything buttoned up for taxes this year, filing, well, jointly in the next year, individual, and talking with my financial planners and all that kind of stuff. And then she keeps like using my credit card and stuff, and it's pissing me off. Um, and then just following a schedule. Like I got a job offer yesterday to start January 6th. So being in a job schedule, like when I have a work calendar, I follow it to the T. But just this limbo stage of life of don't have to get up at a certain time, don't have to go to bed at a certain time. I know to go work out to help my back pain and my mental. I know to have a calendar and try to go to bed at the same time. I just don't do it and I don't care. And like, I know what's best for me. I just don't do it.
What do your saboteurs tell you about why those are hard? Like, why is it hard to go to the gym? Why is it hard to go to bed? Why is it hard to do the things with the financial statements and things like finalize that? What makes those hard?
I don't know if this is the actual thing, but I always tell myself there's something more important to do right now and I can do those later. And the way my brain works, I don't have to do anything until it's required. And then once it's required, I'm like 10x efficiency and just knock it out. So if I don't have that fire lit under me motivation, I just mess around and barely get stuff done.
So your mind is telling you that if you don't have the fire lit under you, it's going to be too hard. So don't do it until that fire is there.
Well, it's like finishing unpacking. Like I know that's very important for my living space and me feeling settled and going through all my stuff from the move and stuff, but it's not required. Like I'm functioning with the stuff I need in front of me and just living in a space of boxes. So it's like very top priority and also doesn't have to be a priority.
What do you think the messages that your mind, your saboteurs are saying around why doing more than the minimum is hard?
I don't know. I'm like, this is just a thought. I have no idea. But like, if I had all the stuff that I know to do in order and lined up and buttoned up, and my life or my experience of life or whatever still isn't going a certain way that I think it should be, could be, if I had all those ducks in a row, then maybe like I'd have to admit something to myself, or like be stuck in doing all these tasks that seem like I don't want to do them right now, and I have a robotic life and schedule, and then I'm just stuck in that kind of healthy structure, but I'm not fulfilled or something.
Yeah. So it's hard because it sucks out originality. It sucks out the thing that feels like lively to you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you guys see like the power of like if we can get to like those like what are those stories underneath why it's hard? It's a lot easier than to think about like how can I come at it from a sage perspective? Because if we just are like, I just keep putting that thing off, but we don't stop to think about like, well, what am I believing about why I should put it off or why it's going to be too hard or why I don't like it? If we don't stop to think about that, it's a lot harder to have any concrete response to it. Because like think about it this way, like if I see you guys and I'm like, hey, how are you guys doing? You're having a good day? And you're like, yeah, great day. And that's it. You don't say anything else. There's not a lot for me to where I can't go very far with that unless I'm asking more questions. But if you say, oh my gosh, I had such a great day today. I got up and I made this killer smoothie. It's the best smoothie I've ever had. This is what I put in it. And then I had a call with a client and it was like, that was such a great call. I was so excited and I was fired up. Now I have something to engage with because you're telling me more specifics, right? The same thing, like your sage brain, when it has more specifics to deal with, it's a lot easier to start engaging versus if you're just like, oh, that thing is hard. I'm not going to do it. You start to think about why it's hard, why you think it's hard, why you don't want to do it, what's holding you back. Then it's a lot easier to start thinking about alternatives, right? So I think that's a really insightful thing, Michael, to think like, okay, there's some part of me that's believing, it might not be the only belief, but some part of me is believing that if I get everything done, life is still not going to feel the way I want it to feel. And now I'm going to be stuck in this really boring life. So not only am I going to have to admit that my life isn't good, it's not because I didn't have that stuff done that my life isn't good, just that my life isn't good. I'm gonna have to face that and I don't want to. And then I feel like I'm gonna be boxed in. I don't like that. Yeah, of course, if there's a subconscious part of you that's believing that, of course, why would you want to get those things done? Because your brain's telling you it knows what the outcome is and it doesn't feel good. That outcome doesn't feel good. Why would you want to do any of those things if it's going to lead to that outcome?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if those are part of the underlying beliefs, how might you use activate strategies to create more ease this week? To pick one of those areas that is like causing grief for you, and how could you use activate to make it easier this week?
So like, if I took all my tasks and looked at my schedule at the beginning of the week and kind of scheduled things out and put some schedule structure in there, that would be huge. So like I've got a bunch of tasks in various areas, so maybe putting them all together holistically would be the first step.
And then how can you celebrate that first step? So you gather all your tasks together. Does it feel exciting to gather those tasks together, or does that also feel like a chore?
It's like the same thing. Like I could find them all, put them all together, but that's low priority compared to doing one important task. Anyways, yeah, that would just yeah, that would be good to just eliminate and have one source to go to, and then feel like I'm not going to drop the ball on stuff I write down that I want to get to. And then out of sight, out of mind, a week later, I come across it or something. So that would be, I don't know. I'm trying to like
So I think
minimize
there's
the negative, but it's not celebrating the positive.
well, you could celebrate that you did it, but I think I would encourage you to maybe think about this differently, because I think Michael, that your brain will often tell you the solution is in structure. The solution is in being more organized. And I think that in of itself causes a barrier, because it's not like a natural thing for you. Not like you get excited about organizing yourself. Some people get excited about that. That's not, you don't get excited about that. So I think it might be like shifting even the thing that you're focusing on. So maybe it isn't that you're never going to be somebody who has one centralized task list and you always go back to it and you stay to that structure. That's maybe not going to ever work for you. And that's okay. So then what could work for you? Like, I'm going to just do a daily task list. It doesn't, if I forget something, that's okay. Or you might like find something that actually feels compelling to you versus like trying to force yourself into something that doesn't probably fit for you.
Okay.
So thinking about maybe the first step is just like, I'm going to like kind of what we were saying with Gina too, like my first step is actually, okay, what would be a goal moving me in the direction that I want to go, which is feeling like I'm more in control of these things that feel a little bit out of control. What would make that process feel more compelling to me? It's the first thing that I could do with that. I'm going to decide one thing, or I'm going to not focus on putting a whole system in place, but I'm going to focus on picking what I think is my most important task and deciding what's the first step I need to do to get that most important task done, instead of getting distracted by the other tasks. I'm going to pick one task that I think is my most important and see it through. Now, when I get distracted, I'm going to not, put that to the side and be like, I will do that when I finish this one thing.
Yeah.
What I need to do to energize that.
Yeah. Like I really like paper calendars, but I get obsessed with digital tools, and I have all these different accounts, Outlook accounts, Gmail accounts, iCloud accounts and stuff. I really think if I just committed to my paper calendar like I used to, that would give me peace of mind and I enjoy it. And then I wouldn't have all these things all over the place and be so kind of confused.
So maybe something for you might be doing an energize your sage brain before you start that task.
Okay.
Or like, what will help me feel good is if I pick out a calendar that I really like the way it looks, because I want it to visually look good. So I'm going to pick out a calendar and then be like, "Ooh, how is it going to feel when this calendar is filled out?" Right? Like, think about ways to make that process feel more infused with good energy versus like, I know I need to do it. I know it's going to be good for me.
Yeah. Okay. I was laughing because I have like 5. I just like collect them, and
Yeah,
there's
I get
a
it.
different shiny one every week. Anyways.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
that's
get it.
good. I like that.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, we see the theme here though of like that we get stuck because we're like, this isn't fun. Whatever this is that I'm saying I want to do isn't fun. We want more fun. That's a really cool thing. Like, to want more fun is great. That's not a bad thing at all. Where we get tripped up is we think either we can't make it fun, or we shouldn't want it to be fun. Of course we want to have fun. We're still human. Just because we're adults doesn't mean we should stop having fun. Of course we should have fun. Of course, of course. Okay. So this week, keep doing your daily focuses. That the step of like what's needed now is a really powerful one that should be in your daily focuses as well. And then today, week 7 module unlocks, and that talks about the last power of Navigate, also talks about different applications for PQ. So we'll talk more about that next week. Heads up, I will be sending out a link for you guys to schedule your first one-on-one. So after we finish our week 7, In January and February, we're going to have a combination of group calls and one-on-one calls. I'll talk more about that next week, but I would love to get everybody's first one-on-one scheduled for that first full week of January. So I'll send out the calendar link for that, as well as January and February dates.
Okay, are we just meeting together like 1 or 2 more times, or?
So in this exact format, it's only next week at our normal time. We'll be back on Tuesday. And then January and February, I'll tell you more about it next week, but there's a pod that just finished, like we just had their last call right before this one. So they finished week 7 today. The calls, when we do them in January and February, to give everybody more options, I'm going to just open the group calls that people from either pod can come to them, so that you've got more time options versus like if we just do it only at one time. So you'll be able to join those calls for ongoing support. But the weekly modules as they've been, the last one like that is the one that unlocks today.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, enjoy your the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you guys back on Tuesday for our regular session before the new year.
Okay. Thank you.
All
Have a good
right.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.